Hi Year 10, welcome back to term 3. So this video is going to be on quadratic equations and how we can solve quadratic equations. So a quadratic equation is an equation which can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b and c are constants and a cannot equal 0 because if a was 0 we'd end up with a linear equation, not a quadratic. So when we solve a quadratic, which means we're trying to find out what x is, there is the possibility of having two solutions, one solution, or no solutions. Now what that means is, if there were two solutions, we would have this first graph. Because, if you'll see, the graph intersects the x-axis at 2 points, so there's two solutions. Remember, because we're finding the x values. If there is one solution, then the graph touches the x-axis at 1 point. And if there's no solutions, then the graph does not intersect with the x-axis at all. Well, when we're looking at ways to solve the quadratic equations, we're going to look at 4 different ways. We're going to look at factorisation, completing the square, the quadratic formula, and then I'll also show you how to do it on your graphics calculator. So this video today, we're just going to focus on factorisation. So when we're solving by factorisation, we first factorise a quadratic, which we did in term 1, so just as we have done before with factorisation, same process there, and then we apply something called the null factor law. So the null factor law is when the product of two or more numbers is 0, then at least one of them must be 0. So basically it means if we have a times b equals 0, then for it to be equal to 0, a must be 0 or b must be 0. Alright, some steps for doing this solution by factorisation. So firstly, we've got to make sure the quadratic equals 0. Then we're going to factorise the quadratic. Then we apply the null factor law, and then we solve the linear equations we're left with. So we just have a few examples. So first one, x squared equals 3x. So step 1, make it equal 0. So we'll have x squared minus 3x equals 0. Now, because there's no constant, we can just factorise really nice and easy here by just factoring out 1x. Now, if you look here, we have one thing multiplied by something else, which means we can now do the null factor law. So the first part, x equals 0, or we will have that x minus 3 equals 0. So when we find our two things that multiply together, we then make two separate linear equations where both equal to 0, and then we solve it. So the second one will have the x equals 3. So in this situation, for that quadratic of x squared equals 3x, x has to be 0 or 3 for it to work. Now let's have a look at b. So we're going to have x squared plus 3x, and then we'll have minus 28 equals 0. Now this one we can solve by factorising. So we want to have two numbers that multiply to get negative 28 that will add to get 3. So remember, just as we did in term 1, when we have our plus and our multiply, so negative 28 add to get the b value, which is 3. And if we find those two numbers, you'll see we'll have 7 and negative 4. 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. 7 plus negative 4 is 3. Now in this one, when we found those two numbers, because there's no number in front of the x squared, we can just put them straight into the brackets of two numbers we've found. Now once again, you see here we have one thing multiplied by another thing that equals 0. So we can separate these and we'll have x plus 7 equals 0, or x minus 4 equals 0, and then we solve each of those. So x will equal negative 7, or x will equal positive 4. And that's pretty much all we're doing when we're solving. So you have to be able to factorise to be able to do this method. This method, though, you have to note, does not work for every quadratic. It only works for ones that have really nice numbers. And when we go on to the other methods, that's where we can start using those for any type of quadratic. But this one is often faster if you can see it. Okay, C, we've got 5x squared equals 3x plus 2. So first of all, let's rewrite this So it equals 0. Always try and have the x squared as positive. I find it the easiest way to go. Now with this one, with our plus and multiply, now because we have a number in front of the x squared, remember it's going to be a times c, so it's going to be 5 times negative 2, which is negative 10 for the product, and the sum is the value in the middle, which is negative 3. So we're wanting two numbers that multiply to get negative 10, then when we add them, we'll get negative 3. And what you'll find with that is that it will be negative 5 and 2. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10, negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. Now when we have it in this form, when we have a number in front of the 5x squared, remember we have to separate this middle term with those two numbers. So rather than writing minus 3x, I'm going to separate into minus 5x plus 2x. Minus 2 equals 0. So just separate that middle term with the two factors you found. And then from here, we're going to separate this into two sections, factorize each of these separately. So we'll have 5x outside of x minus 1 plus 2 outside of x minus 1. And then we can finish our factorization. So remember the bracket that's the same, and then the other bracket is what's left over, which is a 5x plus 2. Now we have one thing multiplied by another thing. So x minus 1 will equal 0, or 5x plus 2 equals 0, and then we can just rearrange. So this second part here, we've got to do a couple of steps. We'll have 5x equals negative 2, then x will equal negative 2 on 5. And there are two solutions. D, have fractions. First thing we want to do is get rid of the fractions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross multiply to get rid of the fractions. I'm just going to come over here, which means we'll end up with 2 times x minus 2 equals x outside of 6 plus x. And then we can expand that and then simplify. So we'll get 2x minus 4 equals 6x plus x squared. Put it all onto the one side. I'm going to move it all to the right hand side now, so my x squared stays positive. We'll have x squared, we've got 6x, we'll have minus 2x, so it'll be plus 4x, and then it will become plus 4. Now from here, we're going to factorize. Now, if you're really switched on, you will see that this is a perfect square, which means when we factorize this, we'll end up with x plus 2 all squared. If you can't see that, that's fine. Once again, just find your factors and do it that way. Now, because we have two brackets the same, it means we can rewrite this if we wanted to like this, but because both brackets are the same, it basically just means that x plus 2 will be equaling 0, and so x equals negative 2. And because if we were to expand the x plus 2 all square, we get the bracket the same, they're both just going to end up being x equals negative 2. So for this type of a question, you'll see there's only one solution, which is x equals minus 2. All right, last one. E, so we've got 1 on x plus 4 on x plus 6 equals 1. Once again, we're going to get rid of our fractions. Easiest way to do this is to put everything over a common denominator, which in this case will be x times x plus 6. And then we've got to make it like that for everything. So 1 over x, we need to times that by x plus 6. The second part, we're going to have to times it all by x. Remember, we have to times the numerator and the denominator. Then we also have to do it to the right-hand side of the equation. So it'll be x plus 6 over x plus 6. Now, once we've got that, we can then just get rid of the denominators. And we will have an equation we can then work with. We can simplify this, so we're going to get 6 plus 5x equals x squared plus 6x. Rearrange it so everything's on the same side. We'll get x squared plus x minus 6. Now from here, same as what we've done before. So when it multiplies, we'll get negative 6, and when we add two numbers, we'll get 1. and you'll find those two numbers are 3 and -2. So 3 times -2 is -6, 3 plus -2 is 1. Now once again, because there's no number here in front of the x squared, we can just put these numbers straight into the brackets. So we'll have x plus 3 and x minus 2. Then we can apply our null factor law. So x plus 3 equals 0, or x minus 2 equals 0, and then x will equal -3, or x equals 2. And that is solving quadratics by factorisation.